Hey everybody, another day, another set review on the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and today we're going to look at all of the red cards in Core Set 2019. Of course, this is a limited set review. These are my opinions. These are how I'm going to approach the set. I want to hear your opinions down in the comments below. But without further ado, let's get on into the first card. Up first is Act of Treason. Act of Treason is 2 and a red for a sorcery at common. Gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. On its own, it's mediocre. It sometimes just ends games, and a ton of the time it doesn't do enough at all. But this set has the sack outlets. We talked about it yesterday in black. There's a black-red sacrifice deck, and you don't just have to sacrifice your own things. Load up on Act of Treasons, steal your opponent's things, and sacrifice them. Maybe even you get to attack with their creature first, depending on what exactly your sack outlet is. So in the wrong deck, this is like a C-. I typically never play these cards if I can deal with it. I know some people do play them more than me, and that's fine. But in the black-red sack deck, these go up in value. Luckily, most people at the table won't want this. So if you're starting to get into the black-red sack deck, and you see this in like pack 2 or pack 3, pass it. It will almost definitely come back around. So C- in the wrong deck, almost like a B- in the right deck. Up next is Alpine Moon. Alpine Moon is a single red mana for an enchantment at rare. As Alpine Moon enters the battlefield, choose a non-basic land card name. Land your opponent's control with the chosen land name, lose all land types and abilities, and they gain tap, add 1 mana of any color. This card's awful. This card is absolutely awful. There's no reason to play this card in this format. You are not naming one of the tapped lands. That's just not going to do anything. And the other lands in the set just are not a reason to ever play this card. It's a straight F. It's probably going to have a bit of value attached to it, maybe. So maybe you could draft it for value, but obviously this is meant for modern or further back. So don't ever play this. Straight F. Up next is Apex of Power. Apex of Power is 7 red for a sorcery at Mythic. Exile the top 7 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may cast non-land cards exiled this way. If this spell was cast from your hand, add 10 mana of any one color. This is also awful. You did hear me say this was 10 mana, right? It's an F or an F- or a G. You're never casting this. And if you do, you're just casting some spells, some random spells. Seriously, I don't want to ever see anyone playing this because it's just going to reveal sadness and defeat. You don't even get to cast the spells for free. You still have to pay for them. You get 10 mana, but you already had 10 mana. No, just no. Absolutely awful. F-. Up next is Bane Fire. Bane Fire is an F-. No, it's not. Bane Fire is X and a red for a sorcery at rare. Bane Fire deals X damage to any target. If X is 5 or more, this spell can't be countered and the damage can't be prevented. Bane Fire is amazing. It is a snap first pick. You should never, ever pass this. This will end so many games of Magic. It's 100% splashable. And if you find yourself in really dire straits and you can't end the game with this card, you can still use it as removal. This is a straight A+. This is a rare that I would love to see in every single pack because, like I said, you can splash this in your blue-green deck because it's just 1 red mana and then X to frequently end the game. Bane Fire's crazy. A+. Up next is Boggart Brute. Boggart Brute was, I believe, our introduction to the Menace mechanic, or at least the Menace word. We've obviously had the mechanic for ages. 2 and a red for a creature Goblin Warrior at common. It's a 3/2 with Menace, and that's really good. We just talked yesterday about how I really liked the Aetherborn creature that was a 3/2 with Menace. Boggart Brute's the original, and it's pretty solid. This will go in basically every single red deck. This will frequently get in for 3 damage at least once or twice if you have removal, and you can keep 1 creature on their board. It's just going to keep getting in. Boggart Brute's a solid C+. I'll usually play multiple copies if I can get my hands on them. Up next is Catalyst Elemental. Catalyst Elemental is 2 and a red for a creature elemental at common. It's a 2/2. Sacrifice Catalyst Elemental, add red. Not a huge fan of this. It's a 3 mana 2/2, which is expensive. The effect has to be amazing. The effect is not amazing. If you are in a deck that has big creatures, probably dragons, this might help you out, except it's a red card that makes red mana, so it's not helping you splash for any of the amazing Elder Dragons that we'll see in a couple of days. Maybe it's helping you splashing for a rare red dragon, and it comes down a turn or two early. But that's a whole lot of what ifs. That's a whole lot of drawing things in specific orders. So I'm not really a fan of Catalyst Elemental. I think it's just an overcosted bear with a mediocre effect. Reminds me of Skirk Prospector. And remember, you should never have been playing Skirk Prospector in Dominaria. So D- for Catalyst Elemental. Up next is Crash Through. Crash Through is a single red mana for a sorcery at common. Creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. Draw a card. So Crash Through isn't the best. The trample effect usually doesn't matter. In fact, I would say the usual condition for using Crash Through was to draw a card, or it was to enable prowess. The trample had no impact when this was in Amonkhet, and I think I might actually use this the same way here in the red-blue spells matter deck. I'll use this to pump my Aven whatever it was that gets +1/+1. And I get to draw a card, maybe find another instant or sorcery, maybe keep the instant sorcery train going here. The trample effect, as I said, it just doesn't do much. So I wouldn't go out of your way to pick this card. You should be able to wheel it basically every time. In fact, I would say you can probably last pick this card in a decent number of packs. So it's going to be a very low grade. It's like a C-, but there are some decks that'll be totally okay playing this, specifically blue-red spells. Up next is Dark Dweller Oracle. Dark Dweller Oracle is 1 and a red for a creature goblin shaman at rare. It's a 2/2. Pay 1, sacrifice a creature. Exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Play, not cast. So if it's a land, you get to play it. So this seems okay. I think you do need to be producing tokens or a lot of creatures to take some real advantage of it. The chance of hitting removal or a counter spell or something that you don't want to cast that turn is there, but far, far lower than hitting a creature or land or something else that you'll play, of course. I don't think you ever want to first pick this, but I think some red decks will happily love it, especially the black-red sack deck, of course. All in all, I think it's like maybe a B-. I was going to go with C+. That felt a little bit weak. Let's go with a B- for Dark Dweller Oracle. Up next is Demanding Dragon. Demanding Dragon is 3 red for a creature dragon at rare. It's a 5/5 flyer for 5. When Demanding Dragon enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to target opponent unless that player sacrifices a creature. Now, this is a Punisher mechanic. Your opponent's never going to choose the one you want. If they have a 6/6 flying trample on the board, they're not sacking it. They're going to take 5 damage. If they have a 1/1 goblin, they're going to sack the goblin. You're never getting what you want. So do not get into best case scenario mentality with that ability. But get into best case scenario mentality with a 5/5 flyer for 5, because that's just always fantastic. Probably just a flat out first pick in many packs, because a 5/5 flyer is really powerful, especially in red. So I've got Demanding Dragon at just a straight up A. I think it's really good. And sometimes your opponent won't have a great choice for that effect, but most of the time they will have a choice they'll be pretty okay with. So A for Demanding Dragon because of its stats. Up next is Dismissive Pyromancer. Dismissive Pyromancer is 1 and a red for a creature human wizard at rare. Pay a single red mana, tap it, and discard a card. You get to draw a card. Pay 2 and a red, tap it, and sacrifice it. It deals 4 damage to target creature. This is not a rare that I super want to see, but it is a good card. It's a bear with an upside in red. We just talked about in the black set review how that did not ever happen in the past, but it's now somewhat common. You do have to pay for the rummage, though. Rummaging Goblin was free. This you gotta pay. I'm not the biggest fan of that, but okay. Then once this outlives its usefulness, maybe when I'm in top deck mode, it gets to kill an X4 or less, which is also fine. This seems fine, and I'd be happy with this probably in every single red deck. But it's going to be my rare slot, and that's going to feel kind of bad. So I've got it like a B-. It feels a little bit more like a C+, but I think the utility value is there, just not the rare value. So B- for Dismissive Pyromancer. Up next is Double Cast. Double Cast is red for a sorcery and uncommon. When you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Interesting, they changed this a little bit, so you don't have to cast a spell, hold priority, cast this spell, which was always a little bit hard on MTGO, and I haven't done it in Magic Arena. I could see it being even harder. So they fixed it, where it's just the next time you cast it, you get to double it. These effects are just never that great. People really love to think about the amazing things they could do, and it just never really comes together in Limited. So I'm pretty out on this. You have to draw this card and draw the card that you want to copy, and you have to have the 2 extra red mana available. Even the blue-red spells deck, I'm not super excited about that, because the blue-red spells deck, a lot of the things care about casting the spell, and the copy is never cast. So I'm out on this. I don't see a home for it. Not a big fan of double cast. I've got it at a D-. Up next is Dragon Egg. Dragon Egg is 2 and a red for a creature, Dragon Egg. Yep, at uncommon, it's an 0/2, it's got Defender. When Dragon Egg dies, create a 2/2 red dragon creature token with flying and pay a red. This creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. This card is good. This card is an 0/2 wall, which doesn't do much, especially on turn 3 and later, but your opponent's not going to want to attack into it because you get a 2/2 flyer, which is fine on its own, that can fire breathe and get even bigger on the power side. So Dragon Egg is going to make your opponent think twice about attacking. If you're in the black-red sack deck, this is an amazing sack outlet. Sack the creature, get whatever ability it is, if it's a counter or drawing a card or revealing a card or whatever, and get a 2/2 dragon. Super, super, super solid. I like Dragon Egg a fair bit. I don't typically pick it super highly unless I'm already in the black-red sack deck. But I do think it is around kind of the B- territory, and even higher if you are in that sack deck, if you do have the sack outlets. So B- for Dragon Egg. It's actually pretty darn solid. This is what core set looks like, guys. This is a solid card. Up next is Electrify. Electrify is 3 and a red for an instant at common. Electrify deals 4 damage to target creature. It's instant speed, removal for a fair amount of the set. It doesn't kill the bombiest of bomby bombs, but it kills everything else below it. Easy first pick in several packs where the rare kind of whiffed. Maybe it was a demanding or a dismissive Pyromancer, and you'll play at least 2 of these if you can. Easy B for Electrify. Up next is Fiery Finish. Fiery Finish is 4 red for a sorcery at uncommon. Fiery Finish deals 7 damage to target creature. Yep, that's probably just unconditional removal. It is 6 mana at sorcery speed, which is very expensive and kind of lame that it's sorcery speed, not instant. Probably first pickable, but I think you'll grumble about it a bit in some packs. It's just so expensive, though. Be careful. You probably want one of these at most, and I think ultimately it's going to be C+ removal, relatively low on the removal scale just because it is so expensive. C+ for Fiery Finish. Up next is Fire Elemental, fresh off the Dominaria printing. 3 red for a creature elemental at common. It's a 5/4 with no abilities. This was pretty good way back in the day. I'm talking 25 years ago. Now, it's not that great. It's outclassed by a lot of things. It's a 5-drop. It has no evasion. It has no abilities. It dies to 4-power creatures. You probably should feel bad about playing this. So, C-. It means your draft or your sealed pool didn't go quite that well. Up next is Goblin Instigator. Goblin Instigator is 1 and a red for a creature, a Goblin Rogue at common. It's a 1/1. When Goblin Instigator enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 red Goblin creature token. Just like we saw Call the Cavalry as a creature that made a token, we now get to see Dragon Fodder as a creature that makes a token as well. This is fine. It's a red bear, but it's split up into 2. It's fine. It's a C, I think. I don't think it goes up to a C+ at all just because it's split up into 2. In the black-red sack deck, this is a couple of creatures you can toss, which is really good, which is still worse than stealing and sacking your opponent's creatures. That's going to be the highlight of that deck, but this is kind of the default, you'll have these creatures at least to sacrifice. I think still it's a C at best. It probably should go a little bit later in the pack, but I think you'll be fine playing this sometimes, and some decks you'll just cut it. Up next is Goblin Motivator. Goblin Motivator is a single red mana for a creature Goblin Warrior at common. It's a 1/1. Tap it, target creature gains haste until end of turn. So this is Bloodlust Inciter from Amonkhet, which was the secret this card's actually insane card in Amonkhet. I don't think it's going to be as insane here because we don't have the mistake that was Exert, which actually is an okay mechanic, just the bonuses were way too much. Getting a core set creature to have haste just is nowhere near the same power level. I'll start relatively low on this, and hopefully this isn't a format where it's good, because if it is, It's going to be a long summer of just dying to, I don't know, hasty dragons or something. C- for Goblin Motivator, I hope. Up next is Goblin Trashmaster. Goblin Trashmaster is 2 red for a creature Goblin Warrior. At rare, it's a 3/3. Other goblins you control get +1/+1. Sack a goblin, destroy target artifact. Similar to Dominaria, I don't think there's a goblin deck. I don't think there's enough goblins. We've got the rare goblin we already saw with Dark Dweller Oracle. We've got Goblin Instigator, Goblin Motivator. We're going to see 2 more goblins in this entire set review. And one of the next 2 that we're going to see desperately wants to not be in a goblin deck, and it's a very high pick for a different deck. So I don't think the goblin deck exists here either. Giving +1/+1 to your Instigator tokens will be cool. That actually makes that card pretty darn good. It turns it into a Call to Cavalry for 2. No. This deck doesn't exist. There's a tribal thing going on here. We had the Spirit Lord and almost literal 0 spirit support. We've got the zombie deck that's probably the realest tribal deck in the format. So this goblin, obviously meant for constructed, for commander, for standard goblins, or for whatever, not really meant for limited. Still, it is a 3/3 for 4. You could play this if your draft didn't go great, but I've got Trashmaster at a C-. Up next is Guttersnipe. Guttersnipe is 2 and a red for a creature Goblin Shaman. At uncommon, it's a 2/2. See? Goblins. Tons of goblins. There's totally a goblin deck. Well, no, because this is not a goblin. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Guttersnipe deals 2 damage to each opponent. This is another, possibly the best payoff for the blue-red spells deck. Dropping a Guttersnipe, or in a perfect world 2, and then just casting a crash through and dealing 2 or 4 damage, and then off that crash through pulling another single mana instant and dealing another 2. This can end games really, really fast. Also, if you're playing 2-headed giant, play Guttersnipe. It's each opponent. It's 4 damage guaranteed, and that game will be over real quick. Guttersnipe's great. I really love Guttersnipe. It really does help that blue-red spells deck exist. So I'm going to pick this way too highly, just because I desperately want to be in that deck until I find out that it's actually secretly terrible or something. So I've got it at like a B. Realistically, in an average deck, this is like a C-. If you're only triggering this a couple of times, it's an expensive bear. But in the right deck, it is like a B. Up next is Havoc Devils. A name I could have sworn they've used before, but they haven't. Havoc Devils is 2 red for a creature devil. At common, it's a 4/3 with trample. So we've seen this 2 red 4/3 creature quite a few times. Sometimes it has reach. This time it has trample, and that's fine. Those stats are fine enough for filler, and getting trample means that these don't get chumped blocked quite as well. So I think a C+ is probably still just a little bit too much, and C feels actually a little bit too little. So it's somewhere between a C and a C+. You'll play it, and you'll feel fine. Up next is Hostile Minotaur. Hostile Minotaur is a creature Minotaur at common for 3 and a red. It's a 3/3, and it's got haste. This is probably just totally fine. Think about Brazen Buccaneers from Ixalan and how good it felt when they were 3/3s for haste. Now, of course, they also got to sort of scry you a card, but the 3/3 for haste part was actually decent, and I think Hostile Minotaur is going to be equally fine. I don't think it's any higher than a C. I think you play it when you can, and I think if you're flush with better cards, you'll be pretty fine cutting it as well. So C for Hostile Minotaur. Up next is Inferno Hellion. Inferno Hellion is 3 and a red for a creature Hellion at uncommon. It's a 7/3 trample. At the beginning of each end step, if Inferno Hellion attacked or blocked this turn, its owner shuffles it into their library. This card is awful. Like, really bad. It doesn't have haste, which means you're not going, haha, 7 damage. You're playing it, and then your opponent's going, I see, okay. They can then block it with anything, and it virtually dies because it goes into your library in a random spot, or they can block it with any 3-power creature and it literally dies. I'm just super not a fan of this. It reminds me of, I think it was called Lightning Dragon. It was in Fate Reforged? No, Lightning Shrieker, which was basically Lava Axe. It was a 5/5 flyer for 5 with trample and haste, and at the end of the turn you shuffled it into the library. At least it had haste. At least it was Lava Axe. You were probably hitting them for 5 and then it was going away probably forever. This time you don't even get that hasty hit. So I think Inferno Hellion is absolutely awful. I think it's just a straight F. I never, ever want to see this card, and if I see my opponent playing it, I think maybe I'm going to win that match. Up next is Lathless Dragon Queen. Lathless is 4 red for a legendary creature dragon at rare. She's a 6/6 with flying. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. Pay 1 and a red. Dragons you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. They get expensive fire breathing, but all of them get it. Now, how many dragons are you gonna have? Probably not that many. There's one common dragon that we'll talk about in a bit, and it's fine. And then there are the uncommon dragons, such as Dragon Egg, which is a dragon. Keep that in mind. But ultimately, I don't think you're just going to be popping dragons out left and right. If you do get the first one, that's probably good enough to just be amazing. But you got to remember, there's going to be a billion games where you simply don't draw and play Lathless, followed by drawing and playing another dragon, right? Luckily, her fail state of being a 6/6 flyer for 6 is amazing. Lathless looks fantastic. I've got her at a solid A. I think she's a snap first pick. She's great because of her stats, and her ability, her upside is amazing, and it's not going to hurt your deck to try to play into it. So solid A for Lathless Dragon Queen. She looks great. Up next is Lava Axe, which I just mentioned. Lava Axe is 4 and a red for a sorcery at common. Lava Axe deals 5 damage to target player or planeswalker. It is a bad card. Do not play it. I get to teach a whole new generation about how awful this card is. It's really bad. If your opponent's at 5, it kills them. But your opponent's frequently not going to be at 5. Does nothing when they're at 20 or 15 or 10 or even 6. If you don't also have a way of dealing that 1 extra damage, it's one of the worst cards ever. Don't play it. It's a straight F. Up next is Lightning Mare. Lightning Mare is red for a creature elemental horse at uncommon. It's a 3/1. This spell can't be countered. Lightning Mare can't be blocked by blue creatures. Pay 1 and a red. Lightning Mare gets +1/+0 until end of turn. I've been loving the horse cycle so far, but this one I'm not a huge fan of. Can't be countered is flavor text in limited. It so rarely matters. This is a harder to cast 3/1 for 2. Usually it doesn't cost color to cast it. If you're heavy red and have a plan of making sure the way is clear, this is probably fine. But of course, if your opponent's not just playing mono blue, the path may not be clear. I think I don't start this in my main deck. I think I actually do start cutting this regularly, and if I'm up against blue, it becomes a decent sideboard card, but I think I'm actually going to put this at a D+. I don't really care for this horse. Sorry, Lightning Mare. Up next is Lightning Strike. This lightning I care about. 1 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Lightning Strike deals 3 damage to any target. Player, planeswalker, creature, just zap. In direct contrast to Lava Axe, we get 3/5 of the damage for 2 mana at instant speed that can also hit creatures. This works in every single portion of the game: ahead, behind, kills a creature, kills an opponent, does everything. This is a first pick in many packs. You'll play every single copy you can get your hands on. Solid B+. Up next is Onaka Ogre. Onaka Ogre is 2 and a red for a creature ogre warrior at common. It's a 4/2. Well, it's a 4/2 for 3. I hate 4/2s for 4. What about 4/2s for 3? I still kind of hate it. 3/2s for 3, I'm usually begrudgingly fine with. I usually give them like a C-. This has 1 more power, so I guess maybe we can bump it up to a C. But, don't go crazy on these. Don't play a ton of these. You should cut them, I think, if you can. We'll go to a C, just because it's a 4/2 for 3, but I think C- might be more accurate. Up next is the red planeswalker Sargon Fireblood. Sargon Fireblood is 1 red for a legendary planeswalker Sargon at Mythic. Starts with 3 loyalty counters. +1, you may discard a card if you do draw a card. Rummage. +1, his second +1, add 2 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast dragon spells. -7, create 4 5/5 red dragon creature tokens with flying. Sargon looks like a solid sort of B tier planeswalker. His first +1 is cool if you have a card to toss. You won't always, but you typically will. Luckily, he has another +1 even if you can't, but it's only good if you have dragons specifically in hand. But boy, is it good if you're splashing for the 3-colored Elder Dragons, because it can be mana of any color. But yeah, you might not always have that dragon. So there will be times where you have 2 choices on how to +1 Sargon and they both do nothing. But luckily the first one, you'll generally be able to do it. Also, he doesn't protect himself, which is a massive strike against most planeswalkers. So ultimately, I'm just not going to go anywhere above a B on Sargon. B- is probably more correct as well if you don't have those amazing dragons. If you do, maybe it goes up to like a B+, but you still have to draw the dragons. They still have to be in your hand for his +1 to do anything. So Sargon, I think, is just a straight B tier planeswalker. Let's keep him at a B just because repeatable free rummage is fine enough, plus the planeswalker tax. Up next is Sargon's Unsealing, which we only had a foreign version of, so for the longest time in my notes it was Sargon's Broken Seal. Sargon's Unsealing is 3 and a red for an enchantment at rare. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 4, 5, or 6, Sargon's Unsealing deals 4 damage to any target. Whenever you cast a creature spell with power 7 or greater, Sargon's Unsealing deals 4 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. I'm going to have to see how this one plays out, but it's likely just not good at all. In a very specific red-green ramp deck, where you know you're going to be playing a lot of big things, this could do some real damage. But I think it's better to just keep casting big things than bother wasting time on this card. I'm going to start at a D+. I'm going to watch out for a deck that likes it. Ultimately, it feels kind of like Impending Doom, where there's going to be like a couple of decks that a couple of times make it work. And in general, it's just going to be bad. So D+ for Sargon's Unsealing. Up next is Shock. Shock is a single red mana for an instant at common. Shock deals 2 damage to any target. Again, going back to Lava Axe, this is 2/5 of a Lava Axe for 1 mana. Same as everything I said about Lightning Strike, -1, I guess. This is a solid first pickable in very weak packs and highly pickable after that card. You'll play multiples of this very, very happily. B- for Shock. Up next is Siegebreaker Giant. Siegebreaker Giant is 3 red for a creature giant warrior at uncommon. It's a 6/3 with trample. Pay 3 and a red. Target creature can't block this turn. 6 power, cool. 3 power, not cool. Trample, cool. Dies to a million things, not cool. I don't know how I feel about this big dumb idiot. 3 red, 1 creature can't block is cute, but feels slightly win more because it's not breaking a stall. You know, you're going to have so much mana to make their team unblockable or not be able to block. It's not helping you out when you're behind. It's really only helping when your opponent has a single blocker, which is probably you already winning. Seems like a C to me. The toughness is just so low for this on a 5 mana creature. So C for Siegebreaker Giant. Up next is Smelt. Smelt is a single red mana for an instant at common. Destroy target artifact. This is pure sideboard only. And there are artifacts. There's not many that I'm terrified of, so I think it's a bad sideboard card. D- for Smelt. Up next is Spark-Tongue Dragon. Spark-Tongue Dragon is 3 red for a creature dragon at common. This is our common dragon. It's a 3/3 with flying. When Spark-Tongue Dragon enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 red. When you do, it deals 3 damage to any target. So this has kicker. It's a 5 mana 3/3, or if you kick it for 2 and a red, deals 3 damage. It lightning strikes something. Yeah, this is a totally fine card. If you're in a bigger red type deck, likely paired with green. At 5 mana, it's not going to go into your massively aggressive red decks, but in those bigger decks, getting a 3/3 flyer for 5 will be fine. If you happen to have 8 mana, getting to bolt something will be great as well. All in all, I think it's like a fine C+ in those decks, but avoid this if you are the low curve aggro. 5 is just too much. So C+ for Spark-Tongue Dragon. Up next is Spitflame. Spitflame is 2 and a red for an instant at rare. Spitflame deals 4 damage to target creature. Whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay red. If you do, return Spitflame from your graveyard to your hand. Spitflame's fine. I don't know that it's a rare that you're excited to see, because it doesn't hit players like Lightning Strike or Shock does. Most of the time you're using that on creatures in limited anyways, those. Still, very first pickable if you do see it, with only bombs and completely unconditional instant speed cheap removal going over it. Solid card. Easy B, because it's just going to kill a lot of the format. If you do get this back with dragons, it becomes way better, but you're just not going to have a deck that's loaded up on dragons, I don't think. Even with Sparkton Dragon at common, I don't think you're going to have more than like 3 dragons if you kind of luck out, and I think 2 or 1 is more likely. Still, it's 4 damage for 3 mana at instant speed. Straight B for Spitflame. Up next is Sure Strike. Sure Strike is 1 and a red for an instant at common. Target creature gets +3/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. It's entirely possible that Sure Strike is my favorite, or at least one of my favorite combat tricks. It's cheap enough to have no problem keeping the mana up. +3 and first strike means that the creature is going to kill whatever is blocking or being blocked by it. I'll generally always play a Sure Strike whenever I can. Like all combat tricks, some decks are just too stacked though to bother playing the card. So it is a C at best, but it's a C that I really like. Up next is Tectonic Rift. Tectonic Rift is 3 and a red for a sorcery at uncommon. Destroy target land. Creatures without flying can't block this turn. I hate this card. I hate this card because I have had so many instances of playing a game of Limited and it's going great, and then my opponent, who shall not be named, will say, "Did any of your guys fly?" And of course they don't, and then I die. This card can be very, very, very good in the red aggro deck, where you're flooding the board, you're getting in for 1 damage and 2 damage and 3 damage here and there, you're whittling them down, and then suddenly you have an unblockable team for a turn, and you hit them for 7 or 8 or 10, and they're just dead. That being said, it does not go into every single deck. I don't think I'd put this in a red-green ramp deck, although there's the possibility that your big stompy creatures can get through, but they're probably getting through anyways. This does go in a pretty specific deck, and that deck is typically like a red-black aggro or a red-white aggro, a deck that's going wide quick, getting in for a bunch of damage early, and then finishing the game in one fell swoop. Ultimately, Tectonic Rift is like a C-. You do not pick this early, you pick this very, very late, and some decks simply won't really want to play it. Blowing up the land's cute, but it really doesn't matter because this should be ending the game. So C- for Tectonic Rift. Up next is Thudd. Thudd is a single red mana for a sorcery at uncommon. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Thudd deals damage equal to the sacrifice creature's power to any target. So of course we always had Fling, which was 1 and a red for this, and it was instant speed. Single red mana, sorcery speed, means we don't get to use this in combat or on our opponent's turn or whatnot, but it's still really, really good. Acts as removal if you need it, more likely hits your opponent in the face. This can actually be a finisher in a big red-green deck where you ramp into a big creature, maybe a 10/10, and then you throw the 10/10 at your opponent's face and they die. Also, in the red-black sacrifice deck that I've been talking a lot about because I'm super excited about it, you can active treason, steal their creature, attack with their creature, sacrifice their creature, throwing it at their face. You can do a bunch of damage with their own creature. Thudd seems very solid. I'd play this in red-green always, I think. Red-black, I'd be putting a massive premium on Thudd. Other decks, I'm not as big a fan of this. Obviously, if you're playing 1/1s and 2/2s, you're red-white or something like that, you don't play Thudd. It does literal stone nothing. But in the right decks, this is a solid card that you probably should put even a slight premium on. I'm talking like a B+ in the red-black sacrifice deck, and in the red-green ramp deck with big things, probably even a B-, whereas in other decks, it's going to be much more of an F. So really runs the gambit. You need to know when you should be playing Thudd, because there are situations where it is one of the better cards you can get your hands on. Up next is Tormenting Voice. Tormenting Voice is 1 and a red for a sorcery at common. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card. Draw 2 cards. It's fine, and I almost never play it. There's situations where it's dead, you're empty-handed, or the only other card in your hand is way more valuable than 2 random cards, but that's not terribly common. I pick and play this like a D+. Really, it's more like a C-. It's just personal preference that I typically don't play it. Regardless, you probably shouldn't play this too commonly, even though the lure of red card advantage is big. C- for Tormenting Voice. Up next is Trumpet Blast. Trumpet Blast is 2 and a red for an instant at common. Attacking creatures get +2/+0 until end of turn. We talked about this a fair bit in white. White has Inspired Charge, which is +2/+1 for a lot more mana. 2 white, which is much harder to cast than 2 and a red. Paired with the white weenie aggro deck, this is just going to end games. You need to know when you want this, though. There's a billion red decks that should never, ever, ever play this card. So make sure you have a plan to use it. Also, make sure that you do remember it says attacking creatures. Unlike Inspired Charge, which, despite the name, does work on blocks, Trumpet Blast does not. Do not use this to try to get your opponent during your blocking phase. All in all, this is like a D- in many decks, and in the right deck, it's more of like a C+. You'll get these if you want them. They should wheel, so you should pass them for other stuff. Yeah, make sure you have a plan for using it. And like Inspired Charge, make sure you're using it to end the game. Don't use this to get in just a bit more damage. Up next is Viashino Pyromancer. Viashino Pyromancer is 1 and a red for a creature Viashino Wizard. At common, it's a 2/1. When Viashino Pyromancer enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to target player or planeswalker. Even the Pikers are getting upgraded these days. It's a 2/1 for 2, which we've talked about a lot as a Piker. It's usually slightly cuttable but playable, especially in aggro. The fact that it deals 2 damage basically means it's unblockable in haste the first turn, which are words that most red decks would just absolutely love. So Viashino Pyromancer looks great if you're in an aggressive red deck. Maybe red-black, maybe your plan is to kind of go aggro, sack stuff, or just straight aggro. Red-white, this is really good. And loading up on these is probably fine as well. Getting a couple of these, guaranteeing yourself 4 damage if you play them, seems fine. C+. I think I'd play Viashino Pyromancer, and in probably everything that's not the red-green ramp deck, I would play as many of these as I can get. C+ for Viashino Pyromancer. Our second last card is Volcanic Dragon. Volcanic Dragon is 4 red for a creature dragon at uncommon. It's a 4/4 flying haste. This is a core set bomb. There's not much going on here. There's not paragraphs of rules text. It's just real good. It is a 6 mana flying 4/4 with haste. That's probably just going to be unblockable the first time you play it, because your opponent's not even going to be expecting it. And flyers are frequently unblockable because your opponents may just not have flyers. This is an easy B. I'd first pick this if the pack was somewhat lacking. Just remember it is 6 mana. Don't jam this in your 2-drop Viashino Pyromancer deck, but pop this into your dragon deck, your red-green ramp deck, etc. Straight B for Volcanic Dragon. And our final card for the day is Volley Veteran. Volley Veteran is 3 and a red for a creature goblin warrior at uncommon. It's a 4/2. Hold 4/2 for 4. When Volley Veteran enters the battlefield, it deals damage to target creature an opponent controls equal to the number of goblins you control. So it's at least going to ping a creature. And if you do have additional goblins, maybe you have a Goblin Instigator, so you've got 2. So suddenly this has Lightning Strike attached to it. It's going to probably kill a fair number of creatures. Like I said, though, I don't think the Goblin deck really super exists. You're not going to be loading up on Goblins. I'd be shocked if this was more than 3 damage frequently. I think 1 is really going to be the real common amount of damage that this deals, and so we're looking at a 4/2 that pings, which probably isn't something I'm super excited about. I think in an average deck, I'm on a C-. If you've really loaded up on goblins already, I think you can probably put this up to like a C+, but I wouldn't train wreck my draft. Like, I wouldn't pick this early and go, aha, Goblin Instigator over Lightning Strike, Goblin Instigator over Bomb Black card. The Goblin deck's not real. Don't try to go deep on this, but it's probably an okay creature if you have some goblins. So C-, C+, it'll vary. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for the red set review. Red looks interesting. It's obviously very dragony. We got our first real taste of dragons. We'll get a lot more dragons in a couple of days, though. There's some good cards, some bad cards. Definitely excited to see how red plays out, because the 2 decks that I desperately want to draft are both red-black sack and red-blue spells. Let me know what you think of the red cards, what cards I was wrong about, right about. Talk with me, talk with each other down in the comments below. If you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at @TheManaLeek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me at facebook.com/TheManaLeek, twitch.tv/TheManaLeek, and patreon.com/TheManaLeek. If you like the content, click that thumbs up button, click subscribe if you want to see more. If you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all tomorrow for the green review.